Okay. So, what I wanted to do with this interview is sort of talk about my experience in life and some of the things that I've been going through may apply to some people, and also this is something I've never told anybody outside of my family, because the circumstances surrounding my family are that we are really divided. There's been a lot of custody battles. There's been a lot of just really crazy things that have happened that, you know, it's a lot of stuff to unpack. So, a little background about my family is that there are a number of public figures in my family, and because of that, pretty much everything I do is regulated, and so I don't really get much of a social life outside of VR, which is why I'm here, because most, if not all, of my friends are now here in VR. And that's just because it's so difficult to let people in my life now, because unfortunately it seems to be that there are a lot of people who try to use me to get to the people who are in my family, and that's just an unfortunate reality of sort of it's par for the course. And a little bit of background about who my family is I'm not going to give specifics, obviously, because I want to remain anonymous as much as I can, but we're in the food industry, I'll say that, and so no celebrities or anything like that, obviously, but in the corporate world, my family is pretty known, and because of that, we got some people who unfortunately come into our lives with not the best intentions, and this is hard to talk about because I've never really openly spoken about this, and it's also something that I don't really talk about a lot because I can't. And one of the things that I think will resonate with a lot of people, hopefully, is custody, because there have been a lot of custody battles in my family over me in particular, growing up, because my side of the family, there's two sides of the family. My side of the family didn't have much. I come from pretty humble beginnings, and me and my mom, my dad isn't in the picture, and me and my mom grew up. We didn't have much. We lived in a 900 square foot house, and we did our best. And then in 2007, my aunt, who is on the side of the family that is in the corporate world, filed for emergency custody after my mom was hospitalized for mental health issues after visiting the Auschwitz. I'll just say it, Auschwitz. She visited Auschwitz, the Nazi death camps, and that really affected her. And so because of that, my aunt decided to file for emergency custody because my mom was in the hospital due to her trip to Auschwitz, and she wasn't doing well. But the thing that affected me the most growing up was the fact that I came from nothing and this extremely, almost impoverished conditions, to suddenly being taken care of by this side of the family that seemed to have everything in the world. And I remember the first time that it ever really affected me. I was on the way to school, and usually my aunt would drive me down to the bus stop at the bottom of the hill, and I'd wait for the bus and then I'd get on. But then one day we got there and I got on the bus, and people were talking about the car that I was driven to the bus stop in, and I was a kid. I didn't know anything about that, and people were like, "Hey, that's a cool car, can I have that car?" I was like, what are you talking about? And it became this thing where people would view me as somebody that they envied, and I didn't understand it. I didn't know why. I knew that things were nicer with my aunt, but I didn't understand what that really meant in society, because as it turns out, they're part of the 1%, and I didn't know what that meant. I didn't have any concept of what that meant, other than the house was bigger, just things like that. But it became this thing where I just couldn't handle it. People would talk about me, and they would talk about my family, and I didn't understand it, and it became too much. And so I just started to shut down, and ever since then I just haven't really opened up, because it's so terrifying, the prospect of people knowing who my family is before they ever meet me. And that's just something that I've had to deal with my entire life. And I'm now not living with my aunt anymore, thankfully, but just the fact that there is that attachment, there is that thing that is attached to me, just makes me feel like crap, honestly. Because people have expectations, and they think, oh well, he comes from blah, 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 so he must be like blah, blah, blah. And it's just awful, because I'm a regular person. I'm just like anyone else. I have feelings. I have a real life. I have friends. But unfortunately, just because of the people that are in my family, I can't have any of that normally. I can't exist normally, because there have been times where I'm just minding my business, and people will start talking to me about my family, and I'm just like, God, I don't know who you are. I don't want to talk to you about stuff like this. I understand, but at the same time, it's not really your business. And so I've sort of resorted to VR, where I can exist anonymously and just make really good friends and have lots of fun. And some of the friends that I've made so far have really gotten me through all the custody battles and stuff like that, because that's stuff that I am unpacking right now, that I'm dealing with as I speak here. Because it's tough. It's hard to see your family split, and it's tough to see family members going at it, and having opinions and thinking they know what's best for somebody, and then acting on it and ripping apart a bond between a mother and son. Because I had to live without my mom in my life for more than a year, and that was the hardest thing that I've ever gone through. And I think what people should get from my story is that if you see somebody who you think has it all, or if you see somebody who you think, oh, their life can't be that hard, or or just if you objectify them or treat them like an object, or something that doesn't apply to a normal human being. We are people. We have feelings. We see everything people say. We have to deal with that every day, even though we didn't ask for this kind of a thing in our life. We didn't want it in most cases. I certainly didn't. I didn't ask for any of this. I would love to just be myself in my real life and not have to resort to VR, but here I am. And in a way, I think I'm grateful that I have this experience, because VR, you can do anything you want, you can be anything you want, and that's something that I desperately need in my life, because I can't just I'm not even allowed to post my political opinions online, because that would be viewed as too much of a scandal for my family. I'm not really allowed to have opinions publicly. I'm not allowed to to just being opinionated in general is something I've been advised against because it reflects negatively on my family. And that's ridiculous. Like, what kid should have to grow up like that? What kid should have to grow up knowing that anything he does or says would reflect badly on the people that he loves, and that he can't really be a kid, and he can't really be a teenager, and he can't really be a young adult as everyone else? And, you know, I think it's just so disheartening to see the way people treat, you know, people with things that they want. Like, if you think of a social media influencer, for example, people talk about them like they're not real human beings. They talk about them like they're just some thing that they saw online that they bought and are bored with now, and then they're moving on. Like, if you leave a comment on that person's account, chances are they're going to read it, they're going to see it, and they have to deal with that. And, you know, I just think people need to be more mindful of that, and so that these people who didn't choose to have to live like this don't have to worry about things that I've had to worry about, with like the not being allowed to be opinionated, or not allowed to just talk about how I really feel, you know? And that's when I heard that you were doing an interview, I was like, wow, maybe I should use this to get everything off my chest, you know? So that's sort of my story. Yeah, of course. So it all began when my mother decided to go on a humanitarian mission with my aunt, and part of that was visiting Auschwitz, the Nazi German death camp, which is, you know, I don't even have to talk about that. It's just an atrocity. But it exists, and my mom went there, and she couldn't handle it. It broke her mentally, and she checked herself into a mental hospital to get help. But during that time, I was staying with my grandparents, and that was when I was still able to live a normal life. And then, unfortunately, I was at school one day, and I was in line getting lunch, and I see my aunt walking through the front door, and she's this grand woman, you know, just very fashionable, and she likes to make an entrance, and she certainly did. Like, what are you doing here? And, you know, obviously I was young, so I was a lot more enthusiastic than that, but I didn't understand why she was there. And she said, "It's okay, sweetie, just go get your lunch." And so I did, and then I was called into the principal's office. When I got to the principal's office, they said, well, your aunt is here to take you to your new home. I can't say the city, but they mentioned a city's name. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, you're going to be living with your aunt now. And they weren't lying about that, because I didn't even get to go home that day. I was flown immediately to the new city, and I barely got time to say goodbye to my friends, to my teachers, to anyone who I cared about. Just gone. You know, I had a girlfriend at the time. I mean, not really, but it was someone who was close to me, as much as it could be back then at that age. And I didn't ever see her again. And then suddenly I was thrust into that new life. And during that time, it changed my whole perspective on what life is, and it never really went back from that. And one of the hardest things for me during that time was seeing my mom, who was finally released from the hospital, come to the new city to see me, and she was turned away. And I could hear her and I could see her, but I couldn't talk to her. And I was in tears. I was crying because I missed her so much, and she was crying, and they just didn't let me see her. About 2 months later, I was finally allowed to see her, and we both just broke down immediately. I had kind of changed during that time because of the new existence that I had discovered, and so I really wasn't the best I wasn't behaving very normally, because I was kind of a spoiled brat at the time. But unfortunately, this whole thing did lead to behavioral changes because of both the custody combined with the new existence I had to deal with. I acted out a lot. And I've never told anybody this, but one time I was asked to cut the grass. And I was so enraged at the fact that somebody would ask me to cut the grass that I set the lawnmower on fire. And, you know, that was probably my lowest point in life, where I just was totally out of touch with reality. I think it definitely comes back to the fact that I was so separated from my mother, and this whole new life that I was given with my aunt just sort of changed our relationship dynamic, and I ended up taking it out on my mom, which wasn't fair to her.